Welcome, everybody. My name is Lori Marsh. I'm an occupational therapist from Children's Therapy Corner, along with Haley Yaros. She's also an occupational therapist. We work together in the Midland location. You've got our bios in there. I've actually been with Children's Therapy Corner it'll be 19 years in September. So I've seen and done about everything where it comes to kids. Plus I came to Children's Therapy Corner with a lot of years of experience before that. So they call me the therapy mom at work, so because most of our other therapists are the same age as my kids. So, but welcome, we're so thrilled to be here today. We're going to talk about the sensory needs of your kids. If you'll look at the papers that we handed out to you guys, you'll notice that our kids are not the only ones that use their sensory systems to help keep organized. How many in here like to chew on the end of their pens? Yeah. Who chews gum all the time? Yep. Who taps their foot when they're in a meeting or listening to people present things? Yep. So we all have our little idiosyncrasies that we use. We just see it more with how our kids do it. So we wanted to give you guys that look into yourself a little bit so you can see how you help organize your own body and then take that into consideration as we are looking at the kids and how they react with systems that aren't working as efficiently as ours are. So some of the things that we're going to learn about today is just your own sensory needs. You know, thinking about that as we talk about each of these systems. We all have issues. At Children's Therapy Corner, our feeding therapists are all our picky eaters. Somehow that worked out that way, that they're the ones working with the kids that are picky eaters, and they are picky eating themselves. So it's funny listening to them talk about one of the things they have to try with the kids that is definitely not something that they eat during their session. It's very enjoyable to listen to them talk about that. We're going to talk about the difference between sensory meltdowns and tantrums. There is a difference, and we'll help you guys hopefully understand those differences. We're going to talk about the 7 different sensory systems and how they impact our participation in our daily skills, and then learning a few strategies just to target those different sensory systems. So I'm going to do the first part, and Haley's going to do the second part. That's how we decided to split this up today. So you're looking at that checklist that I gave you. You know, keep some of these systems in mind. They talk about, you know, the oral system. They talk about moving, talk about your touch, talk about your visual system, and talking about your olfactory system. So keep some of those in mind. With sensory integration, this is how our body takes in the information, organizes it through our senses, and then we respond to those situations. When there's a sensory mishap or not taking in that information well, that happens to all of us. If you think about, oh, I've got a busy day at work today, I'm not wearing those pants because they drive me crazy. Or I'm really hungry right now and I've got to get through this next session with this kid that is tricky. I'd better grab a drink of water or do something to help me get through this next session with this kid. So we all have to do this. It's just how well we do it. So we would not say that we have sensory processing issues. We just handle them better. So that's how we kind of look at that. If there's sensory problems, there's definitely some behaviors following those up. We all have some difficulties. Some of our kids have more than others. We see that throughout all different diagnoses. We work a lot with the kids that have a autism spectrum disorder, but we also have kids with Down syndrome, with cerebral palsy, with all different other genetic difficulties. And the one thing that they do all have in common is that there are some sensory issues. We also see kids that just have the sensory issues, and do not have a diagnosis of autism. So we do work with those kids as well. So you're in Walmart, you see a kid having a full-on meltdown in the aisle because they didn't get the toy they wanted. So the first thing that most of us would do is think, oh, that's just a bad kid. He needs to just learn how to calm down, behave himself where he's supposed to behave himself. But some of those cases are true. Some of it is just being told no, and they had the meltdown. But with kids that have sensory processing disorder, there's a reason behind the meltdown. The lights are too bright in the store. There is there's a tag on his shirt that he doesn't like and didn't realize that until they got to the store. They get overstimulated and just melt down. So there's a difference. So when we look at, is this a meltdown because of their sensory processing difficulties, or is this a tantrum? This is probably the number one question we get from parents that we're working with the kids. So things that you can ask yourself is, the child seemed to be in control of their behavior. The minute you give them what they want, it shuts off. That's a behavior. And that's where we bring Holly in to help us with that behavior. Will they negotiate? Sensory kids can be great negotiators to get out of doing what they want to do. 2-year-olds can be great negotiators at times to get out of doing what they're supposed to be doing. What's in it for the child? Do they gain something by throwing this tantrum or meltdown, or are they having a meltdown because there's some sensory piece that's really bugging them? Have we fought this fight before? Every time we go into the store and don't leave with their toy, we get a meltdown. We're seeing it over and over and over again. And then, does your child show remorse? Does he apologize? Do they apologize after the fact? Oh, I'm really sorry, I melted down, I threw that tantrum. So those are good questions to ask. So showing that difference, they tantrum, they're going to try and negotiate to get what they want. During a sensory meltdown, they are unable to even think clearly enough to be able to negotiate out of that. You'll hear a lot of, I don't know, I don't know, I don't know, instead of, well, can we do this instead? They usually, you can understand what the tantrum is being caused by. The favorite one is just being told no, having to put the tablet down, having to shut the TV off, those kind of things. With the sensory systems, you'll see a specific trigger. The lights are too bright. I made them wear jeans to school today instead of their soft running pants. There's a funny smell in the room. So we'll pick up on triggers that'll happen every single time. There's some motive behind the behavior when it's a tantrum, and they really lack, and with the sensory meltdowns, you'll really see them not being able to control their responses. These are the kids that might lash out, that might hit something, that might run into something, hit the wall, bang on the floor, something to get that input that they're seeking into them. With tantrums, you'll see an on-off switch. With the sensory, you will not see that. It'll drag on. They won't, as soon as you give them what they want and it shuts off, then you know you're not dealing with a sensory issue at that point. Some things to help with accommodating in an environment. One thing with the sensory kids is they can get very visually overstimulated. So minimizing clutter is one way to help them be able to control their area, having just a few things around. I always like to say, if you've looked at a kindergarten worksheet, how many different colors and pictures are on that math worksheet that they have to try and navigate in a schoolroom? That So a lot of times with these kids, it's just too overwhelming using that visual system, and so we have to take some of that stuff away for them to be able to do it. Give them choices. They can still be your choices, but give them choices. That helps them feel more in control. Even just having a space where they can go and feel safe is another good thing to do. Quiet, safe place. It could be under a table. It could be a beanbag chair. It could be in their room. It could be in a closet. So they might need it to be dark, or maybe they need it to be brighter. So they have a fun light to play with. Having their favorite toys or something, a blanket, pillow that they really enjoy. Some things that you can use at home is, pillows, blankets, beanbag chairs. They've got a swing, any of those things that will help them in that environment stay calm. So we have our sensory systems. We learn about these in school, but school doesn't give us all of them most of the time. So we learn about our touch system, we learn about our visual system, we learn about our auditory system, and we learn about our taste and smell. And those are all very important systems, but from the OT realm, we spend a lot more time with the vestibular system, which is your movement system. It's located above your ears. That's what helps you feel dizzy. It tells you where you're moving. We also deal with the proprioceptive system. That's in our muscles and joints and tells us how hard we're pushing on something or where our body is in space. And then Holly just talked about potty training. The other one that we talk about is interoception, and that's our internal organs, knowing if we're hungry, if we have to go to the bathroom. This is where we'll see, if our heart is beating fast, where the anxiety and nervousness comes in. Those are some of the feelings with our internal organs, and so that's the interoception. So we have two different kinds of kids typically. They don't fall neatly in these two things. They can be a seeker in one system and be an avoider in another. They can even have some seeking and avoiding in the same system. So these are just general overviews of things. So a seeker is somebody that's really pursuing and finding the ways to get through these activities. You'll see kids that just jump and jump and jump and jump on a trampoline. Up and down, up and down, up and down, up and down. We see it a lot with seeking. We call them our movers and groovers, and that's all they do all day is move and groove. Then you have your avoiders, and this is where they're just avoiding that input. So these could be your tactile defensive kids that don't like tags, that don't like rough clothing like jeans, don't want to wear socks and shoes, don't want to wear underwear. Some just don't want to wear clothes at all. They would prefer to be naked all day. So those are some of your avoiders. These may be the kids that won't get near a swing or a slide because they do not want to move. So our first system that we're going to talk about is that tactile system. This is one that I deal with. I'm a very tactile person. I definitely pick my clothes out depending on what I have to do that day. If I know piece of clothing bothers me, it won't go on me if I know I have a busy day. So you have light touch, you have pressure, vibration, temperature, pain, and these are all the receptors that are underneath your skin. So this is one of your largest systems that you have because it covers your entire body. So what you might see with the child, they either dislike or love their fingers being dry or sticky. These are the kids that want to play in the sensory bins, bin of beans, bin of rice, but don't give them any slime or water beads because they don't want anything to do with that. Sometimes they don't like diaper changes. They don't like that change that they feel when the diaper's taken off and put back on. Clothing is bothersome. That's a big one in this tactile area. Either they don't like being touched, or they're seeking out increased touch. So they're wanting the big hugs, and they're wanting to be snuggled and wrapped up tight in the blankets. Or if you touch them, they respond like you've actually hit them or hurt them just with a touch. The system can go in both directions. So what we like to, as a non-therapist, we push the boundaries for these kids, so we're trying to get them to get used to these things. But from your end, you want to respect that extreme discomfort. So, offer them, if they don't want to play in a texture bin, offer them a spoon, offer them a shovel, something where they can still interact with something but not have to touch it with their hands. They don't want to do finger painting, so give them a paintbrush to paint with if they don't want to do finger painting. Or if they want to do finger painting, great. Let them. I've had kids that want to paint their whole bodies. So in that instance, I'd probably switch to soap or shaving cream that can rinse off a little bit better. But it could be, but really, really allow them to do the task, but make it easier for them. So you're not going to have the meltdowns. And these are the kids that we really use the sensory bins a lot with. Haley's great about making different sensory bins we have ones with rice and noodles and dry noodles, dry beans. We have the Orbeez, the water beads. We have Theraputty, Play-Doh. We always have shaving cream. My personal favorite, I love pulling out the applesauce and letting them play in the applesauce because you get the smell and the tactile texture with it, plus it's a food, so I'm hitting all different areas with that. So just, let them do that exploration with their hands. Some of this is very calming for them. I had a mother that loved our bean bin, and she liked it so much that she actually made her own and took it to work and put it on her desk so she could play with it during the day. So we all have different things with this tactile system. So the next area that we really work a lot on is this vestibular system. This is our movement and balance system. It tells us if we're moving or standing still. It is also the system that organizes all of our other sensory systems, so kind of keeps us on an even keel. It is also closely tied to our hearing and our vision. So this vestibular system is the area we really work heavily on with our kids. Lots of swinging, rolling, spinning, jumping, all of those things in our sessions. These are the kids that may not be able to sit still. We were commenting on, if anybody hasn't noticed, the chairs rock, the backs lean back. So we were all like, oh, this is nice. So we notice things like that when movement can be brought into a situation. Even rocking while standing still, all you moms know it. You stand and you rock with the baby back and forth, back and forth. So you find yourself doing that. You'll see me doing that. I'm a definite rocker. One other area that we see a lot is the kids won't want to tip their heads back, like when they want to get their hair washed. They have that trouble with that head position and changing that head position. It might even be, them going upside down. They don't like going upside down or being up high. Kids that are really struggling with processing this, that are hypersensitive to it, are going to move really slowly and very deliberately so that they're not bringing a bunch of attention to that movement. It's just too much for them. These are also the kids that get car sick. You can become an OT, and that'll drastically reduce your getting car sick, because if you spin and watch spinning and swing all day, it works on your system, and I have not been car sick since I started working at Children's Therapy Corner. No issues whatsoever. So some of the activities that we really promote with this, even things where you don't need any equipment, just bending over and touching your toes. We do a lot of things like bear walks, crab walks, jumping like a frog, kangaroo hops. Our big one is our swinging. We swing kids all the time. I would say 99% of our kids go on a swing at some point during our session. And swinging can be a lot of things. It can be calming. If you're just swinging back and forth, if you're just rocking in a chair back and forth, very calming. But you can also start sending them in circles, swinging high and fast, and that's going to be more alerting to them and wake them up. So lots of things you can do with the swings. Another thing you can just do with them is log roll, just rolling. If you think about rolling down a hill when you're a kid, being able to do that, that'll help with that system. So one thing to keep in mind with that vestibular system is that any spinning that you do with them can last in the body for 6 to 8 hours. That is one reason why we do work on that vestibular system, is we can get a very lasting, long effect with organizing these kids. Some need more vestibular input to have the same response, and so we have to increase the amount that we give them and the intensity of what we're giving them. Other kids can become overwhelmed with too much movement, and then will get really disorganized with that same movement, with just even a small amount. The next system that we work with is the proprioceptive system. This is in our muscles and joints, allows us to have our coordination and smooth movements, helps us know how much force to push on something. Have you ever walked up to a door that you think is going to be really, really heavy, and you get ready to push it really hard and then fall through the door? That's your proprioceptive system, and your visual system was telling you the wrong information. It can be the other way too. You can walk up to a door and think it's going to be just fine. You go to open it, and you walk into the door because it didn't open. It didn't push hard enough. Also helps us helps with our sleep and wake cycle with that proprioceptive system. So what you might see from the children is they either use too much force or not enough force. We see this a lot in giving hugs. You have the kid that runs up to you and about barrels you over. We call them the bull in the china shop, giving you a big hug, about knocking you over. We also see it with their writing. They either push really super hard when they're writing and wear their crayons and pencils right down, or they write really, really light and don't put enough pressure in. They may run into things. These are your clumsy kids that can't walk through a door without running into either the door frame or the door. They also may have trouble sitting up straight. They'll want to lean on other things to help support them, either on the table or the chair. If you're next to them, they'll lean on you through all of that. So some of the things that we do to help this proprioceptive system is, to be able to carry heavy items, pushing and pulling. So if you think about taking trash cans out or hauling the hose around the yard, shoveling snow, raking leaves. For those of you that don't have to shovel snow, you need to come to Michigan during that time of year. But yes, heavy work. Anything that they have to lift, push, pull, tug, any of that works really well for this system. This one also is where we do those animal walks, the frog hops, the bear walks, the crab walks, jumping like a kangaroo, all of those. If they're having trouble with holding on to things or holding on tight enough, we provide them with larger crayons or markers so that they can get a good grip on the utensil. We also don't take the backs off their chairs. We give them a nice back to help support them, and also so that their feet are supported as well while they're doing sitting activities. All right, I'm going to hand it over to Haley.
Thank you. All right, we'll go ahead and jump right into the visual systems. So this is our ability to process everything within our environment through our eyes. It's colors, images, changing in lighting as well. And this system is closely linked to the vestibular and proprioceptive system, which makes sense. It's called all at the head level. So some of our kids, they may need more support by wearing glasses. Another thing too, for some of our seekers, they're looking for those light up toys, shiny objects, things that spin, that give that extra visual input, cause and effect toys as well. Some of our avoiders, when we're doing transitions or changes in lighting, so going from a dark room to outside where it's bright and sunny outside, that change from dark to light can be really overwhelming to some of our kids, and sometimes we don't think about those changes in light. But I noticed the lights in here are actually pretty good today too. Even the type of lighting that we have in our buildings, the difference between warm, soft light and fluorescent lighting, there's definitely a big difference in how our kids process all those different types of intensities in light. And as Lori mentioned earlier, with being overwhelmed by rooms that are busy, so kind of reducing that visual clutter, simplifying the environment a little bit more. Also, trouble scanning from left to right. Typically, we see this with kids who are maybe learning to read and are losing their spot, copying from a board, or even if they're just playing with a certain puzzle or toy and they're having trouble locating the correct spot. So some things that we can do: avoid those cluttered rooms, reduce those visual distractions as best as we can. For some of our kids that might be more sensitive to light, we can try to dim the lights or reduce as much of those lights as possible. Maybe they like a fort or a little swing that they can crawl into to have those moments to get out of that light. And I also like to do I Spy games, so having them search their environment to look for certain objects, toys, to promote that scanning piece as well. And then for our auditory system, our hearing, we're getting information through our ears. This is letting us hear pitch, intensity, judging distance as well. So some of our avoiders will see that they're covering their ears when the room is loud. This is me. I do not like parades. I don't like fireworks. I will be that one adult that still covers her ears with all the other kids that don't like the loud sounds as well. Popping balloons. I had a kid pop a balloon right near my face, and I jumped out of my skin. It felt like it was pretty literal. And then startling easily too for some of our avoiders that are more sensitive to this sound. But we kind of put it on the flip side for some of our kids that need more auditory input. Maybe they don't have a consistent response to their name. They need more cues, more input to actually register when their name is called. There is a difference too when, maybe it's a parent saying their name versus someone new too. That can actually be different as well. We also have some of our kids that are hyper-focused with their sense of hearing, and they can hear a cricket outside that you would have no clue that there's a cricket until you go out there and hear it. So even some of that hyper-focus on the ability to hear the clock ticking, the lights buzzing, the cricket outside. For some tips to address some of this as well, allowing the hands over the ears. If you're going to a parade or going to the Tigers game tonight, we like to prepare our kids ahead of time what they may experience, what they're going to see, what they may hear. Sometimes creating that game plan can really make or break the difference between some of those transitions and experiences. And then if a child is very overstimulated by auditory information, being able to remove them from the source, maybe going and taking a walk, finding a quieter room, allowing them to decompress from that overstimulating input. And then we have our taste and our smell system. So this is the ability to understand the food textures, flavors, everything kind of around our mouth area and how we process scent in our olfactory system. So for some of our kids that may be avoiding, we are known as our picky eaters. They will have a limited number of food groups that they eat and will tolerate. They may avoid certain textures, tastes, spices, or no spices at all, where some of our seekers will crave the spicy foods, the more flavors, the more spices that are in them. For some of us, as like Lori and I, we particularly maybe will do sensory play with our kids, working more at the hand and tactile level prior to actually doing feeding and eating at the mouth. So we actually incorporate favorite toys. Maybe the dinosaur jumps in the applesauce and then he goes into the water bin and goes through the car wash or the dinosaur wash. So the kid is interacting with that substance, as Lori was talking earlier with the tactile system. And so they're interacting and they're becoming more familiar with those sounds, the look and the scent of those foods, but are respecting their boundaries as well. And then we have our interoception system. So this was briefly touched on by Holly in the last presentation. This is our ability to process all internal signals within our body. So that's related to hunger, pain awareness, bathroom awareness, and temperature changes. So we have some prime examples in the clinic. We have our kids right now that will come in winter boots in the hot summer, or in the wintertime, they're coming in with shorts and flip-flops, so there's that discrepancy of seasonal changes and what clothes they're actually wearing. We also have like difficulty registering bathroom awareness. Maybe our kids get really excited, they get in the moment, and then they wait till the very last second to use the bathroom, or sometimes they miss that cue and then have an accident. So sometimes difficulty picking up on those sensations and urges. And then we also have our high and low pain tolerance. A lot of our kids will come head to toe in bruises, and they don't really know it or aren't aware that they actually bumped into something or had a significant fall. They say it didn't hurt at all. Where we have some kids, they kind of bump into the wall and have a significant reaction because they said that was extremely painful for them. So with this system, typically it falls into place. It's like a domino effect. When we're targeting the other systems like vestibular, proprioceptive, and tactile systems, this one comes into play with the awareness piece as we're targeting the other systems as well. So an occupational therapist and a special education teacher by the names Taylor and Trott, they developed what's called the pyramid of learning. And the important part with the pyramid of learning is that our sensory systems make up the foundation to all of our other skills that we need for functional participation in our daily activities. So as occupational therapists, Lori and I come in and we help parents determine what the child's sensory profile is. Where are their needs at? Where are their holes, as we like to call them? So we can help create a game plan and figure out what this child needs so that we can actually help develop those functional skills, which then leads to that more participation at home and in the community. So what does this mean to you guys? Being able to understand your child's sensory needs will also be able to help understand what your child learns and how they interpret the environment around them. And the big piece to know is one thing that your child may prefer now will change when they go into adolescence, will change when they go into adulthood. So it's always changing, it's never the same. Sometimes our kids love one thing, and then a couple months later, they're completely switching their preferences around. So it's always doing detective work to figure out what your child needs, but that's why we're also here to help and provide support so we can continue to do that detective work to best support you guys as well. So where do we start? We want to think about the overall structure of your daily routine at home. So kind of starting with your structure at home, what does it look like? What does it start from start to finish? Does it allow for movement? If you have more of a seeker in certain areas, do they have those opportunities throughout the day to move, groove, and get that input in? Or is it a pretty structured day where there's really not any break times? Are your routines typically predictable, or are they constantly changing? Every time we have a change, it can result in more overstimulation and bigger emotions. So understanding how predictable, or is it changing? And then, do your routines allow time for processing different changes and transitions? Does the child get a chance to reflect and discuss what may happen or what recently happened in order to know what's going on? I like to give the cup analogy to my parents. When I think about we all are sensory beings, so we all have different sized cups and capacities and the type of input that we can process on a daily basis. So each person has their cup, and we can tolerate those different types of input. However, let's say your child's at school or daycare, and they had a substitute teacher, and then they were late for lunch, and you keep adding these changes to their day that's not part of their typical routine. And then they come home and it's just an overflow of emotions. And we see this kind of happen a lot. Parents come and he's like, as soon as they get home, I see these big emotions, but they're not reporting at school or reporting it at daycare. And that's because home is their safe space. You guys are their safe space. So they hold it in all day long. And then when they finally get home, it's just like a release of all of that stress that they held in all day. So incorporating activities during the day can help reduce that overstimulation to help reduce the overflow of emotions. So there's definitely different types of techniques or input that can be used. We primarily use a lot of calming techniques for a lot of our kids, especially all of our seekers. But we put them together side by side so you can kind of see the difference in how one can be calming and one can be a wake up. So for our calming input, deep pressure massage, things that can be done maybe before bed to kind of bring the child down for the day, especially if it was a long day, doing some stretches, slow rocking, maybe some white noise and low lighting, and even soothing scents like lavender and vanilla can help with that smell system. Where on the opposite end, where we may need some more alerting input, maybe we're feeling a little tired, we need to wake up a little bit, tickles, running, playing, loud, fast music, bouncing on a ball, cold water play, and scents like perfumes and peppermint will all be a wake up. So kind of along with these organizing strategies, predictability is also important. We like to plan out our day and know what's about to happen. Our children are the same. So being able to prepare them when we can. Now we know life is always changing and we're going to have curveballs, so we can't prepare our kids for everything, but when we can, it's best to try what we can prepare them for. When incorporating movement during the day, it's important that it's purposeful and organized. So Lori kind of mentioned allowing for choices. Typically, we'll give our kids choices, maybe doing some bear walks or jumping on the trampoline. What we find is that our kids have a hard time with unstructured time to actually get input, and what happens is they go from 0 to 100 pretty quickly, and they actually can become more disorganized and overstimulated. So giving them those choices and strategies, but allowing them to have the control to decide what they want to do can be really helpful as well. So now jumping into some sensory play activities that outline some of the systems we just talked about earlier. There's definitely a lot of activities that we can do, so this is just a short list of examples based off each of those systems. So one of my favorites, sensory play using touch. I love my sensory bins. These can be edible or non-edible, so if you have a child that does like to put things in their mouth, you can do dry cereals, cooked noodles, and during Halloween we use some food dye and do cooked spaghetti to make them look like worms, but they can put them in their mouth, they can explore, you can make fun bins, add utensils for practicing some hand strength and coordination as well, but you can get really fun with the sensory bins. For Play-Doh, pretty self-explanatory, although I do like to put Play-Doh in the freezer as well to add a different sensory element versus room temperature and frozen, so then you get some temperature change as well, and it adds a little resistance to kind of work on some of the different input. The dollar stores also can be your friend when you go, and you can get bath mats, carpet squares, sleeping bags, and create a sensory path at home so they're able to explore those different textures and have some different sensory paths or obstacle courses for home. And when you guys are cooking meals, have them help participate in scooping, pouring, mixing. It may get messy, but that's part of the fun, and that's part of the play too with the touch system. Sensory play for our movement. So then also kind of keeping in the back of your mind whether this might be an alerting technique or calming. So bouncing in the chair, bouncing on a ball. We do a lot of swinging. If you don't have a swing at home, sometimes you can put the child in the blanket and have two people hold them and swing inside of a blanket as well. Get those obstacle courses, jumping, dance parties, and swimming can be very organizing too if you have access to a pool. And then for body input, we can do a lot of crawling, tug of war, heavy objects, pushing, pulling, chair push-ups, wall push-ups, I love yoga too for body stretches and awareness, and the yoga is great for mindfulness. You can practice deep breathing techniques with your child to decompress. And even biting, chewing, crunching is organizing input around the mouth as well. Or if you have a water bottle with a straw piece or mouthpiece, the sucking motion is great for organizing the body. And then for visual and auditory, lava lamps, aquariums, anything that has slow, kind of rhythmical, predictable movement is great for decompressing or organizing the visual system. Musical chairs is great too because the child has to be in tune when the music stops, so they're actually listening more for those cues to play that game. And another one I like to play with my kids is guess that sound, whether it's inside or outside. We'll go and we'll determine, like, was that a bird? Was it another person speaking? So again, it's kind of increasing those cues of what they're listening to within their environment. So in conclusion, it's important to understand your own sensory needs in order to help your child or better support your child's sensory needs as well. So having that self-reflection is really important so that we can better support our own kids. And then sensory meltdowns, we know that are a result of overstimulation because it typically leads to a fight or flight response. Our kids go into survival mode, and that's different from a tantrum, which typically has a motive and has that on and off switch. There are the 7 different sensory systems that play a foundational role in our child's development and participation, but those systems change and fluctuate throughout time as our kids age and go into adolescence and adulthood. And then sensory play can be incorporated into those daily routines to promote engagement of the senses, and can be fun for all too, so not just for the child. Lori and I have kind of put together some suggested websites and social media. You guys will have access to this PowerPoint as a resource to kind of go back and look at some of these social media pages and some of the suggested readings and websites as well. We got some books, and then we've got our contact information.
Thank you very much.